Hi, I'm Aiden, and nearly 2 years ago, I made a video called AEW's Greatest Moment This Year. A video that I don't really like much anymore. For one, it probably wasn't even top 5 at the time. It's the same year as Yuta vs. Mox, the CM Punk MJF feud, Christian Cage turning heel, and the first Forbidden Door. And for two, it has aged like shit. Andretti's on Ring of Honor is a part of top 5 after consistently underperforming on TV, and I think that's a pretty good spot for him. I enjoyed the factions matches. And Jericho might just be the worst thing in mainstream wrestling right now. Seriously, how in God's name are we still giving this guy 15-minute segments every week? But I do think I made one really good point in that video, and that was the focus on the crowd. As an aside, the Texas crowd throughout the night, and especially this match, was amazing. This moment would not have worked nearly this well if they weren't so loud and into everything on the show. Good crowds are a big part of what makes wrestling so much fun to watch. Good crowds create moments that can't be replicated in any other storytelling medium. Good crowds make stars. Yeah, I still agree with all of that, and I wanted to explore more of this aspect of wrestling, make a video focusing on these unforgettable moments that are exclusive to this wonderful, stupid medium, because very few forms of media can create this kind of connection with its audience. And I think a good place to start is one of the most reposted clips in recent memory. It's September 15th, 2 weeks after All Out 2021. An unforgettable night of wrestling featuring two of the biggest debuts for a company since The Outsiders and Hogan in WCW. Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson. The greatest of all time comes down for his first live in-ring promo since debut, and before he can even talk, is immediately interrupted by the bastard of all bastards, Don Callis, and fellow contender for GOAT, current AEW World Champion, Kenny by God Omega. Don does his usual spiel of heel shit, and the roar of the crowd barely allows him to speak. They have waited too long for the return of the American Dragon. They needed to hear him speak. They needed to see him challenge the best bout machine. Kenny and Bryan had fought one-on-one once before, over a decade ago in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla when Kenny was still a rookie. It was a genuinely very funny comedy match, but since then, Kenny had ascended to god-tier professional wrestler. Winning the G1 Climax, having the rivalry of the decade with Kazuchika Okada, telling what I think is the greatest story in wrestling history with Kota Ibushi, and holding 3 different world championships at once. Danielson, meanwhile, had a far rockier decade. Don't get me wrong, his WWE run contained some of the best moments and matches in that company's history, but it was plagued with injuries, disrespectful booking, and even a 2-year retirement. That said, when Danielson was allowed to go, even with the Fed's slower and more cinematic style, it was really hard to find any big match wrestler in the world better than the leader of the Yes Movement. That's why when Bryan debuted in All Elite Wrestling, everyone was just itching to see him tear it up with the best in the world. And the current best was just 2 meters away from him. So when Bryan told Don to shut up and moved his attention to Kenny, the crowd erupted. Every wrestling fan worth their salt has dreamed of this match forever, and Tony Khan wasted no time. The American Dragon's debut match in All Elite Wrestling would be against Kenny Omega. AEW's inaugural Grand Slam in Al Thrash Stadium kicks off with Bryan's music barely even able to be heard over the eruption of the crowd. The loudest yes chant since he announced he was coming out of retirement. Then Kenny's music hits. The commentators can't stop talking about how excited they are for this match, how much they and everyone else had wanted to see it. After a standoff with the belt, the two go to their corners. And
confident, but so does Omega. Paul Turner calls for the bell. Here we go. Let's get after this thing. What a great match. These guys can hear it as well as we can. The fans are on their feet. They're loving this, and these two men have yet to lock up.
It's magnificent. I get chills every time I watch this. 20,000 fans losing their minds at the fact they get to see this happening live. These two titans of the industry don't even lock up for the first 2 minutes. It's magic. Look at Danielson's face here, it's infectious, he just can't stop smiling. Kenny is doing his best to keep up his heel persona, but you can tell he is so happy to be having this moment, and the crowd is so happy it's happening. They would go on to wrestle to a time limit draw in one of the greatest TV matches of all time, and the crowd barely even went down a decibel for the entirety of it. It's one of the greatest atmospheres I've ever seen in wrestling. But maybe not the greatest. ECW One Night Stand 2006 is one of the most revered wrestling pay-per-views of all time. It had a stacked card. 2 months beforehand, at WrestleMania 22, the fans booed Cena and cheered ultra heel biggest baddest man Triple H. Okay, let's talk about injuries. They fucking suck. For so many reasons. It always feels terrible to watch your favorite wrestler on the shelf for months or even years because, for whatever reason, something went wrong. But there are two very special moments in wrestling that would play around with the fear of a career-ending injury to phenomenal effect. The first I want to talk about is still one of my favorite moments in wrestling this year. Billie Starkz is a rising star in Ring of Honor. She's been on the brand for nearly a year now under the tutelage of Athena, and after losing to her boss at Final Battle in a great match, she's looking to become the first ever Ring of Honor Women's TV Champion. Across the ring from her is Queen Aminata, another quickly rising and still super underrated star. She has a remarkable blend of agility, grace, and power, and in every category, completely trumps Billie. She dominates through most of the match, cutting off Billie's offense at every turn. The few licks in Billie does get are short-lived. However, her tenacity and sheer stubbornness eventually leads to her getting a reversal on the top rope. With a defiant, she pushes Amanita down to the floor and primes her swan dive finisher. She jumps and...
Oh, knees to the neck, knees to the neck. She's calling.
He's
calling, that's spirit, my God.
You could hear a pin drop. The crowd doesn't immediately realize it, but Billie is called for the referee. The next 3 minutes are still incredibly hard for me to watch despite knowing the result. No one in the crowd makes a peep. Commentary is barely making a sound. Nigel McGuinness especially is mortified, as this is the same way his career ended. Some quiet Billie chants and claps break out as the medical staff help her to her feet, not knowing if this would be the last time they'd see this incredible young talent wrestle. Aminata, in a great display of sportsmanship, holds the rope open to help Billie out. And then...
What the hell? Oh, Starkz, what? She fooled us all! Sleeper locked in! That's in deep in the middle of the ring. What the hell was this? For Aminata to go. The heart, Aminata's eyes are shutting. There's no way! Aminata's out! Aminata's out! Wow.
That psychotic smile of the sudden eruption of the crowd, Caprice is phenomenal.
She fooled us all!
Pure perfection, man. Athena taught her too well. Sure, you can absolutely poke holes in it now. Normally when a wrestler is actually injured, the camera pans away to avoid the uncomfortable situation, and Caprice even foreshadows Billie being okay by pointing out her fingers twitching. But at that moment, almost every single person watching was fooled. She had the crowd in the palm of her hand. I know fake injuries make people really uncomfortable, and I completely understand why. But for me, this was one of the most effective swerves in the last decade. If the match against Athena was a star-making performance, this was her ascending to godhood. Speaking of the last decade, in contrast to Billie, who was only 19, Jesus Christ, I cannot believe she's the same age as me, what the fuck. Mark Henry had been slowing down in the ring for a while. The world's strongest man couldn't keep up with the younger, faster, even stronger generation. On the June 17th, 2013 episode of Raw, Mark interrupts the face of many of that generation, our boy, John Cena. He leaves his boots at the ramp, a common sign that a wrestler is throwing in the towel, and it dawns on the crowd. He's retiring. He enters the ring and immediately tells Cena that he can put his guard down, before going on to cut one of the greatest promos in wrestling history, top 10 at a minimum. Throughout the segments, there's various chants of "Thank you, Mark," and "One more match." But Mark politely refuses. With tears in his eyes, he declares,
"Baby, I'm coming home."
As the crowd erupts, Cena raises his arm and goes to embrace Mark. And Mark turns that into the most vicious World's Strongest Slam ever as the crowd jump out of their seats. Still probably the greatest serve I've seen in wrestling. Shame about the run after it. Eddie Kingston's debut in AEW and his feud with Mox, Sting's debut in AEW, the Stadium Stampede, Brody Lee's entire rise to the top, Shingo Takagi's run as IWGP champion, Walter vs. Ilya Dragunov, the debut of the Tribal Chief. The matches with Jay legit worked way better without a crowd than it did with one. And of course, the Firefly Funhouse. Rest in peace, man. Brody and Bray are missed every single day. But I want to talk about something on a much smaller scale. As far as I know, this hasn't actually been talked about on YouTube at all, but it's a fun little character moment that I really liked. Maki Ito is a Tokyo Joshi pro wrestler that has a very unique relationship with the crowd. She's a fired idol with a bit of an inferiority complex. Operation Rainfall made a fantastic video on her character arc that I'll link below, but to be brief, she's someone who constantly needs validation. Because of this, early in her matches, there's a spot where she gets her opponent up against the turnbuckle and asks, She had been doing this pretty much since her debut, but when the pandemic hit, there was no one even there to respond. A month after the pandemic was held, TJPW held a one-day tournament at their training facility. It was completely empty outside the wrestlers, camera crew, and commentary. Honestly, it was pretty eerie. In her first round match against Suzume, she goes for a signature spot, and obviously, because there's no one there, she gets no response. This doesn't seem to process in her brain, so she shouts again. Commentary shouts from the desk to try and console her, but by now, Maki has started crying. And look, it's overdramatic and it's extremely silly, but it's exactly the kind of dark comedy spot that works without a crowd, and those are extremely hard to make work. Crowds would return in a very small capacity a month later, but they were only allowed to clap. Even then, Ito adapted this into her spot, shouting out her catchphrase, followed by her imitating the crowd. It's adorable, but kind of sad. She knows they care, but can't show it. However, this would only make their ability to cheer much more powerful when 2 years later at TJPW Summer Sun Princess, crowds in full capacity came back and the loudest Ito-chan ever hit.
You hear people, look at that, they've been waiting 2.5 years to say that.
Look at her face. Pure elation. The validation she's missed having for those 2 years of near silence is finally here, and the crowd couldn't be happier to give it to her. The final thing I want to talk about is probably my favorite kind of moment in wrestling. The return pop. Now, this isn't a move that's exclusive to wrestling. A superstar of an industry coming back to is a universal, I can't believe this is real kind of thing. But I think it just hits different in wrestling. There are tons I could talk about. The Hardy Boys at Mania 33, Edge at the 2020 Royal Rumble, the miracle that is Katsuyori Shibata being able to even walk to a ring. But I think there's only one really correct answer when you're talking about the greatest return of all time. CM Punk had effectively retired from wrestling after WWE fired him in 2014 on his wedding day after forcing him to work injured for nearly a year. Still one of the most dickheaded things Vince ever did, and he has done a lot of dickheaded things. That pure love he had for wrestling that was so palpable during his days in Ring of Honor and earlier days in the Fed had been shot dead, and the coffin door was locked with titanium bolts. But gradually, those bolts rusted, and the wood started to chip. 7 years he was gone. 7 years we thought that Phil Brooks being in a wrestling ring again was a pipe dream. 7 years we waited. And then, on July 28th, 2021, AEW announced Rampage The First Dance in Chicago after Fightful reported that Punk was training for an in-ring return. It was the worst kept secret in modern wrestling, and it was all the better for it. Those chants before his music hits still send chills up my spine. But when the first few notes of Cult of Personality come alive, you can barely hear it, as possibly the loudest sustained pop since Steve Austin reverberates through the United Center. Punk comes out and just sits on the entrance ramp for a solid minute, soaking it all in. And how could you not? It's a breathtaking moment. This guy crying? Yeah, he's just like me for real. That shot of Punk screaming in the corner as the camera pans out to show the ecstatic fans before zooming back in on him barely holding back tears is one of the best pieces of production in wrestling history. It's just perfect. A promoter and a talent giving the fans a moment they have prayed for and just letting it ride. Commentary is barely talking throughout this entrance. They're just letting the fans speak for themselves. I rewatched it like 10 times scripting this, and every single time, goosebumps. The promo after is what I think is the best Punk ever cut. Yes, better than the pipe bomb, fight me. It may have not aged well in the slightest for an insane amount of reasons, but the tears it produces are still happy ones. Those neon lights shined brighter than ever. This is professional wrestling at its best. And that's all the moments I really wanted to talk about. What are some of your favorite crowd reactions or stories involving the crowd in wrestling? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and take care of yourselves, everyone.